After US President Donald Trump made some bold claims that India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi promised him that he will stop buying Russian oil, India's Ministry of External Affairs has responded. It has fact-checked the US President. India's Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson Randeep Jaiswal clarified that no such talks took place between Prime Minister Modi and US President Donald Trump. Listen in.
Statement for the questions that you have.
We have a great relationship. He just said that 2 days ago, as you know. We have a great relationship. No, we were not happy with him buying oil from Russia.
On the issue of energy sourcing, we have made a statement. This was put out in the morning today. We would request you to look at that particular statement for the questions that you have. On the question of whether there was a conversation or a telephone call between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump, I am not aware of any conversation yesterday between the two leaders.
A major clarification coming in from India. India's Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson Randeep Jaiswal there fact-checking US President Donald Trump's claims. Bear in mind, Donald Trump had made some bold claims that he was promised by India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi that India will stop buying Russian oil. Now, India has responded and said that no such conversation ever took place between Prime Minister Modi and US President Donald Trump. So the tussle over India's purchase of Russian oil is set to continue even as India's Ministry of External Affairs rebuts US President Trump's claims that India has agreed to stop buying Russian oil. Now, even as India's Ministry of External Affairs hit back at Trump, India's Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal has taken a veiled dig at the US, speaking at the special plenary session of the Indian Chemical and Petrochemical Conference. Piyush Goyal said, and I quote, "We do not want to be at the mercy of monopolistic countries. I'm sure you will appreciate what I'm referring to," unquote.
In some products where you're looking at supply chain resilience, or you want to be sure you're not at the mercy of some monopolistic supplier or monopolistic country, and you'll appreciate what I'm trying to allude to. We certainly don't want to be left at the mercy of one geography or even one or two geographies on any item in our supply chains, which can cripple our entire sector.
Earlier, too, India's Ministry of External Affairs had responded to Donald Trump's claims that New Delhi has assured him about curbing its oil imports from Russia. Responding to the claim, India's Ministry of External Affairs released a statement saying that India is a significant importer of oil and gas and its priority is to safeguard the interests of the Indian consumers. The statement further read, and I quote, "Where the US is concerned, the current administration has shown interest in deepening energy cooperation with India. Discussions are ongoing on the same," unquote. Donald Trump had earlier asserted that India's action will help in his push to isolate Russia over the war in Ukraine.
We have a great relationship. No, we were not happy with him buying oil from Russia because that lets Russia continue on with this ridiculous war where they've lost 1.5 million people, by the way. Russia's lost 1.5 million people, soldiers mostly. This is a war that should have never started, but it's a war that Russia should have won in the first week, and they're going into the 4th year. And I want to see it stop. So I was not happy that India was buying oil. And he assured me today that they will not be buying oil from Russia. That's a big stop. Now I got to get China to do the same thing. You know, that is relatively easy compared to what we just did over the last week in the Middle East. Middle East was 3,000 years, and we got it done. This is 3 years, and I think we'll get it done. I think that President Putin, I think, is going to I think he wants to get it done. We'll see. There's a great animosity between him and Zelensky. You probably have noticed, right? And I think it's hurting the process. Yeah.
Now, Trump had also said that India could not immediately halt shipments, calling it a little bit of a process, but that process will be over soon.
He's a great man, you know. Modi is a great man. That he loves Trump. Now, I don't know if the word love, I don't want you to take that any different. I don't want to destroy his political career, okay? But you have to understand, I've watched India for years. It's an incredible country. And every single year you'd have a new leader. I mean, some would be in there for a few months. And this was year after year after year. And my friend has been there now for a long time. And he's assured me there will be no oil purchased from Russia. I don't know, maybe that's a breaking story. Can I say that? Would you say? There will be no oil. He's not buying his oil from Russia. It started. You know, you can't do it immediately. It's a little bit of a process. But the process is going to be over with soon. He's a great man.
It's his latest claim. Trump also called India a reliable partner and Prime Minister Modi a friend with whom he shares a great relationship. This comes as Trump's latest salvo has raised political temperatures in India. Hours after Trump made the claim regarding India cutting off oil imports from Russia, Congress Party MP and leader of the opposition, Rahul Gandhi, accused the government of being afraid of Donald Trump and the United States of America. And he went on to post the same on social media, enumerating reasons why he says that the government is afraid of Trump and the US. Donald Trump claiming that India has agreed to curb oil imports from Russia. However, India's Ministry of External Affairs is fact-checked that claim, saying that no such conversation took place between India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Donald Trump. And in fact, Ministry of External Affairs fact-checking Trump on multiple occasions, where on previous occasions it has even put out statements saying that India is a significant importer of oil and gas and its priority is to safeguard the interests of the Indian consumers. Big relief for Indian nurse in Yemen, Nimisha Priya. The Supreme Court was informed today that the execution of 36-year-old Indian nurse Nimisha Priya has been stayed and nothing adverse is happening. The court was hearing a plea by the Save Nimisha Priya Action Council, a citizen-led campaign advocating for her release, which sought directions for the union government to take diplomatic efforts to stop the execution. Now, Attorney General R. Venkatramani told the bench that a new mediator has stepped in and that the matter has been listed for hearing in January 2026 with the option for early listing if needed. Nimisha Priya's execution was originally scheduled for the 16th of July. But on the 15th of July, the Yemeni authorities postponed the execution and did not announce a fresh date. This came a day after Union Government of India told the Indian Supreme Court that it cannot do much more to prevent the execution of Priya. Remember, the Indian nurse from Kerala was convicted in the year 2017 for murdering her Yemeni business partner Talal Abdul Mehdi and was sentenced to death in the year 2020, with her final appeal rejected in the year 2023. Diplomatic efforts, including negotiations by her mother and exploration of blood money under Sharia law, are still ongoing to secure Nimisha Priya's release. Moving on. In a giant stride towards Modi government's vision of building a Naxal-free Bharat, the number of districts most affected by Naxalism have been brought down to 3 from 6. Now only Bijapur, Sukma and Narayanpur in Chhattisgarh are the most affected districts by left-wing extremism. India's Home Minister Amit Shah has made a major announcement declaring Chhattisgarh's Abujmar and North Bastar regions Naxal-free after 170 Maoists laid down their arms today. The Home Minister said that the surrender marks a turning point in the decades-long insurgency. and reflects growing faith in India's constitution. In the past 2 days alone, over 258 Maoists, including senior PLGA cadre, have surrendered across Chhattisgarh and Maharashtra. Since the BJP government took charge in Chhattisgarh this January, more than 2,100 Naxalites have surrendered. 1,785 have been arrested and 477 eliminated in anti-Naxal operations. A government statement called this a giant stride towards building a Naxal-free Bharat by March 2026, saying only a handful of pockets in South Bastar in Chhattisgarh remain affected. Amit Shah, the Home Minister, said that the Modi government's surrender or strict action policy is yielding results, welcoming those who shun violence while vowing to deal firmly with those who don't. With operational successes hitting record highs and surrenders continuing in waves, the Home Minister said, and I quote, "Naxalism is breathing its last."
जो होना है बस्तर में ही होगा, मुख्यालय बस्तर के जगदलपुर में होगा और काफी बड़ी संख्या में सरेंडर होना है और जो भी मुख्यधारा में आएंगे उनकी पूरी व्यवस्था भी सरकार की तरफ से की जाएगी। निसंदेह ये 3 ही जिले हैं, इसमें भी नारायणपुर आप कहें कि काफी हद तक अब मुक्त हो चुका है, बीजापुर और सुकमा भी काफी हद तक मुक्त हुआ है। बीजापुर ही अब वो जिला बच गया है जिसमें परेशानी अभी भी है, लेकिन मैं पूरे विश्वास के साथ ही सोचता हूं कि बस थोड़े ही समय में वहां पर भी स्थितियां स्पष्ट हो जाएंगी।
On to the big developments in the Zubeen Garg death probe. Assam's Chief Minister Himanta Biswa Sharma has informed that the probe is moving forward. He informed that the Singapore police will meet Assam's Special Investigation Team or SIT led by ADGP Munna Gupta on the 21st of October to discuss the ongoing probe. Singapore's acting High Commissioner Alice Cheng called on Assam's Chief Minister and expressed condolences on the iconic singer's demise. The High Commissioner said that the Singapore police force conveyed Garg's autopsy report and its preliminary findings to the Indian High Commission in Singapore on the 1st of October. The authorities in Singapore demanded patience from the people of Assam for a thorough investigation into the case. Big developments in the Zubeen Garg death probe. Assam's Chief Minister Himanta Biswa Sharma informing that the Singapore police will meet Assam's Special Investigation Team or SIT led by ADGP Munna Gupta. That meeting is set to take place on the 21st of October for a further deeper probe into Zubeen Garg's death. And in some breaking news that is coming in, there has been a firing again at famous comedian Kapil Sharma's cafe in Canada. Kapil Sharma's cafe called Caps Cafe in Canada has been fired at yet again. We understand that there have been 3 firings in the last 4 months, including the current one. A video of the firing has also surfaced, that's on your screens. Goldie Dhillon and Kuldeep Sidhu have claimed responsibility by posting the same on social media. Shots fired at Caps Cafe, which is the restaurant of famous comedian Kapil Sharma in Surrey in Canada. The third firing at Caps Cafe within a span of 4 months. another firing at Caps Cafe, committing Kapil Sharma's restaurant in Surrey in Canada. It has been attacked yet again, the third firing in 4 months. A video of the firing also surfacing. Goldie Dhillon and Kuldeep Sidhu taking responsibility and posting about the same on social media. We have my colleague Jitendra Sharma now joining us on the phone line. Jitendra ji, बताइए ये तीसरी बार हो रही है कैप्स कैफे में 4 महीने में लगातार कैप्स कैफे के ऊपर अटैक्स चलते हुए आए हैं पिछले 3-4 महीने में।
जी बिल्कुल, देखिए बकायदा गैंग की तरफ से जो गोल्डी ढिल्लों और कुलदीप सिद्धू गैंग है उनकी तरफ से बकायदा एक वीडियो भी जारी किया गया जिसमें बताया गया किस तरीके से उन्होंने कैफे के ऊपर कनाडा के अंदर फायरिंग की है। लगातार इससे पहले लॉरेंस बिश्नोई गैंग ने इसकी जिम्मेदारी ली थी, उससे पहले खालिस्तानी आतंकी है उसने इसकी जिम्मेदारी ली थी और इस बार जो गोल्डी ढिल्लों है, जो कुलदीप सिद्धू नेपाली है, जो गैंगस्टर है बकायदा कनाडा के अंदर मौजूद है और हिंदुस्तान के अंदर अपने गैंग को ऑपरेट कर रहे हैं, इन्होंने बकायदा इस बात की जिम्मेदारी ली है कि उन्होंने ही कपिल शर्मा के जो कैफे है उसके ऊपर फायरिंग करी है कनाडा में। और इसके पीछे का जो अहम मकसद उन्होंने बताया, उनका कहना है कि बेशक जो लोग अवैध धंधे कर रहे हैं उनको हम टारगेट करें और इसके अलावा जो बॉलीवुड के अंदर धर्म के खिलाफ बोलते हैं उनको ये लोग टारगेट करें, ऐसा इनकी गैंगस्टर्स की तरफ से दावा किया गया है। हालांकि जो कनाडा पुलिस है अब वो इस मामले की तफ्तीश कर रही है। जो पोस्ट आया है उस पोस्ट की भी तफ्तीश इस वक्त कनाडा पुलिस के द्वारा की जा रही है और जल्दी इस बारे में कनाडा पुलिस की तरफ से एक स्टेटमेंट भी जारी किया जाएगा। जी,
ये कनाडा पुलिस की तरफ से अभी तक ठीक तरह की सिक्योरिटी क्यों नहीं दी गई है, क्योंकि ये काफी बार हो चुका है ऑलरेडी, ये सबसे बड़ी सवाल बनती है इस वक्त।
बिल्कुल, देखिए बीच में काफी निगरानी वहां पर की गई थी लेकिन बार बार गैंगस्टर्स के द्वारा फायरिंग की घटनाएं जो सामने आ रही है उसको लेकर अब जो कैनेडियन सरकार है वो भी इसको लेकर काफी संजीदा और कैनेडियन पुलिस भी इस मामले को लेकर अब अपनी तफ्तीश को आगे बढ़ा रही है। दरअसल तीनों जो फायरिंग है उसमें अलग अलग गैंग की तरफ से फायरिंग की गई है। एक बार खालिस्तानी आतंकी हरदीप की तरफ से की गई, उसके बाद लॉरेंस बिश्नोई गैंग ने जिम्मेदारी ली और इस बार फिर कुलदीप सिद्धू और जो गोल्डी ढिल्लों है उसकी तरफ से जिम्मेदारी ली गई है। तो इसको लेकर कैनेडियन पुलिस इस वक्त कपिल शर्मा कैफे जो उनका जो कैफे है उसके स्टाफ से पूछताछ कर रही है, उनके बयान रिकॉर्ड कर रही है और आसपास जितने भी सीसीटीवी कैमरे लगे हुए उनकी भी तफ्तीश वहां पर अभी की जा रही है। तो कहा जा सकता है कि कनाडा पुलिस बेहद संजीदगी से इस मामले की तफ्तीश करे और जल्दी इस पूरे मामले में एक ऑफिशियल स्टेटमेंट जो है वो पुलिस की तरफ से जारी किया जा सकता है। जी,
Jitendra Sharma there joining us for the latest on that big breaking story. Thank you, Jitendra ji, for bringing us that update. Shifting focus to the state of Karnataka, where the cabinet has approved a proposal to regulate the activities of the Rashtriya Swayam Sevak Sangh or the RSS and similar organizations in government schools and public spaces. The move aims at bringing all previous orders under one framework to draft a new rule. State Minister Piyush after the cabinet meeting, said that the government cannot control any organization, but those conducting activities in public institutions will now need prior permission from the state government. In the latest, the Karnataka State Cabinet approving the proposal to regulate the activities of the RSS and other similar organizations in government schools and public spaces, while State Minister Piyush admitted that the government cannot control any particular organization. He has said that those organizations which are conducting activities in public institutions will now need to take prior permission from the state government of Karnataka.
Rule of many state governments. The Department of Personnel and Administrative Reforms, Karnataka State Civil Services Conduct Rules 2021. Very clearly it states you cannot participate in political organizations or organizations that have political affiliation. And that's all we are telling them to enforce. We have been little lax on it. That's why we are seeing a lot of government officials batting on behalf of RSS. That is not their job. They have been given a specific job within the government to ensure better governance is delivered to the people. If they want to preach religion If they want to preach RSS philosophy, we will be more than happy to allow them for voluntary retirement and let them actually join the party. Let them join the association. Let them join the Sangh. We have no problems with that. But as long as you are taking salaries from the government of Karnataka, you have to follow the conduct rules of Karnataka government. As simple as that.
Now, in view of Sri Lanka's Prime Minister Harini Amarasuriya's 3-day visit to India, Tamil Nadu's Chief Minister M.K. Stalin wrote to Prime Minister Modi urging him to raise concerns with his Sri Lankan counterpart. He urged PM Modi to discuss the challenges faced by Indian fishermen in the Pak Bay and to seek an early and lasting resolution through sustained diplomatic efforts. In his letter, Stalin said that the fishing communities of Tamil Nadu continue to face significant hardships due to recurring incidents of harassment, attacks and arrests by the Sri Lankan Navy. Since the year 2021, a total of 1,482 fishermen and 198 fishing boats have been apprehended in 106 separate incidents, causing distress and economic loss to these communities. He said that the Tamil Nadu government has consistently sought the intervention of the Government of India to address these issues through diplomatic channels. He had raised this matter with the Prime Minister's office on 11 occasions and made 72 representations to the Minister for External Affairs as well. However, these incidents continue to occur unabated. M.K. Stalin has urged Prime Minister Modi to discuss with the Sri Lankan Prime Minister the retrieval of the Kachativu Island, the immediate release of fishermen and their boats, steps to address incidents of violence and theft at sea, the impact of the nationalization of seized fishing boats and the revitalization of the Joint Working Group or JWG on fisheries. M.K. Stalin said that Tamil Nadu's fishermen have traditionally fished in the waters surrounding the Kachativu Island, which was historically part of India. The island was transferred to Sri Lanka by the Union government without obtaining the state government's consent and without following due process, a decision consistently opposed by the Tamil Nadu State Assembly since the year 1974. As a result, the fishermen now face restricted access to their traditional fishing grounds and frequent harassment on charges of trespassing. In Gujarat, all ministers except the Chief Minister resigned ahead of a cabinet expansion or reshuffle. Ahead of the state cabinet expansion, a total of 16 ministers of Gujarat, except for the Chief Minister, Bhupendra Patel, submitted their resignations. In a meeting led by Chief Minister Patel, it was announced that the swearing-in ceremony for the new cabinet is scheduled to be held at Mahatma Mandir at 11:30 a.m. on Friday. Immediately after the ceremony, the first meeting of the new cabinet will be held under the leadership of the Chief Minister. Amid this major political shift, BJP has once again implemented its no-repeat formula, similar to 2021, including the appointment of the Deputy Chief Minister as well. All ministers in Gujarat resigning ahead of a cabinet expansion. All 16 ministers except for the Chief Minister Bhupendra Patel. A swearing-in ceremony for the new cabinet is scheduled to be held at 11:30 a.m. on Friday. Time now to get you all the latest on the big stories from across the globe on Global Lens. Now, the Minister of External Affairs reacted to the Pakistan-Afghanistan border conflict and said that India remains fully committed to the sovereignty, territorial integrity and independence of Afghanistan. India's Ministry of External Affairs' spokesperson Randeep Jaiswal accused Pakistan of hosting terrorist organizations.
Internal failures, and three things are clear. One, that Pakistan hosts terrorist organizations and sponsors terrorist activities. Two, it is an old practice of Pakistan to blame its neighbors for its own internal failures. And 3, Pakistan is infuriated with Afghanistan exercising sovereignty over its own territories. India remains fully committed to the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence of Afghanistan.
Meanwhile, a big admission by Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. As the 48-hour ceasefire between Pakistan and Afghanistan is underway, Shehbaz Sharif has admitted that if Afghanistan wants to talk, we are ready as the ball is in their court. He then said that if they are serious, they should come forward and talk. Big admission from the Prime Minister of Pakistan, even as a 48-hour fragile ceasefire is in place. Pakistan's Prime Minister declaring that if Afghanistan wants to talk, Pakistan is ready. But the Prime Minister also saying that the ball is in Afghanistan's court and that if they are serious, it should be them who should be coming forward to talk. A rattled Pakistan is asking Afghanistan for talks after escalation of violence, the worst ever seen between the two nations at the border in recent times. Another Gen Z protest has erupted, and this time it's in Peru, in South America. Tensions have flared in Peru's capital, Lima, as police clashed with demonstrators protesting against a newly sworn-in interim president, Jose Guerri, less than a week after he took office amidst a sudden political upheaval. Peru is once again on the edge. Riot police in Lima fired tear gas to disperse hundreds of protesters who tried to storm the parliament building, the first major show of dissent since Jose Guerri assumed office. Crowds gathered near the legislative palace, tearing down security barriers and setting flags ablaze before being pushed back by the police. The protests erupted just 6 days after President Dina Boluarte was ousted and replaced by Guerri, who was next in line as head of Peru's Congress or Parliament. Demonstrators accused the political class of corruption and demanded sweeping reforms, including a new constitution and tougher measures against crime. The unrest was not limited to Lima. Similar rallies were reported in other cities, though without major violence. Adding to the anger, Jose Guerri himself has faced past allegations of sexual assault as well. Though the case was dropped, many Peruvians remain unconvinced. Some protesters even chanted insults, calling him violin, a Spanish slang term implying a rapist. As the tear gas cleared, one message rang out loud and clear. Peru's streets remain restless, and the new leadership is already under fire. Now, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth warned Russia that the U.S. and its allies would impose costs on Russia for its continued aggression if the war in Ukraine does not come to an end. This report tells you more.
All countries need to translate goals into guns.
U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth on Wednesday had a warning for Russia on the Ukraine war.
Now, if this war does not end, if there is no path to peace in the short term, then the United States, along with our allies, will take the steps necessary to impose costs on Russia for its continued aggression. If we must take this step, the U.S. War Department stands ready to do our part in ways that only the United States can do.
Hegseth spoke at a meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group of Kyiv's allies at NATO headquarters in Belgium's capital, Brussels. His comments come as U.S. President Donald Trump's administration is considering a request by Ukraine for long-range Tomahawk missiles.
This is not a war that started on President Trump's watch, but it will end on his watch. So let us seize this moment, strongly forge peace in Ukraine, and let's bring peace through strength. Thank you very much.
Hegseth called on NATO allies to increase spending on purchases of U.S. weapons for Ukraine, following a report that highlighted a sharp decline in Western military support for Kyiv in July and August. He urged allies to ramp up investment in the Prioritized Ukraine Requirements List program, which replaced U.S. arms donations to Ukraine and now requires allies to pay for U.S. weapons deliveries. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte said he expected further pledges, noting that $2 billion had already been committed through the program. But that amount falls short of the $3.5 billion Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky had hoped to secure by October. Sweden, Estonia, and Finland pledged funds on Wednesday. Bigger powers, including France and Britain, have not made such commitments.
Now, Ukraine will need anywhere between $12 and $20 billion worth of military aid next year as part of a new NATO initiative to purchase U.S. weapons. And that's according to Defense Minister Denis Shmyhal. Speaking at a defense summit in Brussels, he said that Ukraine is capable of producing 10 million drones in the year 2026 with sufficient financing from allies, but that it also needs more long-range artillery shells as it fights Russian forces. In September this year, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky asked the US to sell Tomahawks to European nations that would send them to Ukraine in an effort to push back against Russian invaders. It remains unclear how or through which countries the Tomahawks could be supplied. The Tomahawk land attack missile is a long-range cruise missile typically launched from sea to attack targets in deep strike missions. The precision-guided Tomahawk cruise missile can strike targets from 1,000 miles or 1,600 kilometers away, even in heavily defended airspace. Now, European Union leaders have been calling for the building of a drone wall after about 20 Russian drones entered the Polish airspace last month, followed by drone incidents over airports in Denmark and Germany. But the proposal remains in flux, according to officials and diplomats who spoke to news agency Reuters about the project. More details in this report.
After Poland shot down Russian drones that entered its airspace in September, several other drone-related incidents across Europe have left EU leaders increasingly anxious about airspace protection. They're urgently calling for a defense system, throwing out terms like a drone wall.
Propose immediate actions to create the drone wall.
But the proposal remains in flux, diplomats and officials have told Reuters. So what is a drone wall and how would it work? Such a defense system would detect incoming drones and be able to counter them. Here's Robert Tollest, research fellow at the Royal United Services Institute.
It's about integrating all of your air defense assets to work together in tandem, from ground radars, fighter jets, cheap interceptor drones, missiles, the whole range of capabilities and electronic warfare to jam these drones, all working in tandem around the clock.
Tollest says cost effectiveness is key. For the Poland incursion on September the 9th, NATO deployed F-35 and F-16 fighter jets, helicopters and a Patriot air defense system collectively worth billions of dollars. The Russian drones they were responding to cost a tiny fraction of that price.
You just can't be firing hundreds or even thousands of $1 million or $500,000 missiles at these drones that generally cost about $50,000 each. That would be the Russians imposing a huge cost on us.
Tollest says technologies such as cheap interceptor drones and lasers exist already, but have yet to be scaled up. The EU initiative is a test of its ambitions to play a greater role in defence, which traditionally falls to national governments and NATO. And it's a challenge to Europe's ability to take more responsibility for its own security, as demanded by Donald Trump and many US presidents before him. The proposal is also caught up in a power struggle over who should control major European defence projects. Germany and France are wary of handing power to the European Commission, the EU's executive body, diplomats told Reuters. Experts say the plan needs broad support from European governments to secure access to EU funding. To try to win more support from southern and western nations, the Commission has broadened the original concept from an integrated thicket of sensors, jamming systems and weapons along the eastern border to a web of anti-drone systems across the continent. Once the Commission has fleshed out its proposal, EU governments will decide whether to give it the green light. But experts say cost, scale and cross-border integration remain major challenges, with decisions to be made on which systems to buy, where to use them and how to link them all together.
Shifting focus to Kenya, where huge crowds of mourners have turned out to receive the body of Kenya's former Prime Minister, Raila Odinga, a day after he died in India. The body has arrived at the stadium where crowds are already inside, with more people outside. Police used tear gas to disperse the crowd at Odinga's public viewing. Kenya's veteran opposition leader Raila Odinga, who was imprisoned while fighting one-party autocracy and ran 5 times unsuccessfully for the presidency, died at the age of 80.
Kenya's Raila Odinga, a veteran opposition leader at the heart of the country's politics for decades, has died at the age of 80, people close to him have said. A family source said on Wednesday that Odinga had passed away in India while receiving medical treatment. His hospital said he had suffered a cardiac arrest. In response, hundreds of Kenyans took to the streets of the capital Nairobi, crying and waving twigs to ward off bad omens as they formed a procession to his home.
Now we are mourning Odinga. It is really sad. We have lost a leader who fought for the rights of Kenyans.
As a democracy activist, Odinga leaves a legacy that helped seal 2 of Kenya's most important reforms: multi-party democracy in 1991 and a new constitution in 2010. He was first jailed in 1982 after a coup attempt against then-President Daniel Arap Moi, whose government jailed, tortured and murdered opponents. Odinga served a total of 9 years in jail, 6 in solitary confinement. In 2007, he led protests after a disputed election. Kenya was plunged into its most serious political violence since independence.
There must be justice, truth. That's when there will be peace. There can be no peace when there's injustice.
Around 1,300 people were killed and hundreds of thousands displaced from their homes. The violence led to a power-sharing government, with Odinga as Prime Minister. In that role, he pushed for a new constitution that, after a 2010 referendum, ushered in sweeping reforms.
No one could have thought that out of the bitter harvest of the disputed elections and the violence that pitted our people against each other just 2 years ago, we would be witnessing today the birth of a national unity that has eluded us for more than 40 years.
Odinga ran for the presidency, unsuccessfully, 5 times. However, he was often near the levers of power through deals struck with his opponents, a knack that earned him the nickname Agwambo, meaning the mysterious one. Odinga's last bid for the presidency was in 2022. He lost to incumbent President William Ruto and challenged the result, which was then upheld by the Supreme Court. Undeterred, Odinga launched street protests, only to strike a pact with Ruto in 2024, effectively leaving Kenya without an official opposition. On Wednesday, world leaders issued their condolences, with India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi calling Odinga a towering statesman and Tanzanian President Samia Suluhu Hassan describing his death as a tragedy not just for Kenya, but for all of us.
US President Donald Trump has confirmed that he has authorized the CIA to conduct a covert operation in Venezuela amidst escalating tensions with the South American nation. Speaking at the Oval Office, Trump said that the move was prompted by the flow of migrants and drugs from Venezuela into the United States of America. He claimed that thousands of prisoners and mentally ill individuals entered the U.S. and accused Venezuela of sending narcotics through the Caribbean.
Well, I can't do that, but I authorize for two reasons, really. Number one, they have emptied their prisons into the United States of America. They came in through the, they came in through the border. They came in because we had an open border policy. And as soon as I heard that, I said, a lot of these countries, they're not the only country, but they're the worst abuser. But I think Venezuela is feeling heat, but I think a lot of other countries are feeling heat, too. We're not going to let this country, our country, be ruined because other people want to drop, as you say, their worst. They have given us their worst.
Trump did not clarify whether the CIA is authorized to target Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro, but indicated that the operation is meant to increase pressure on the nation. In response, Nicolas Maduro condemned the operation, calling it a CIA-orchestrated coup, and warned against regime change attempts. Venezuela's foreign minister also accused the U.S. of aiming to seize the country's oil resources.
No al cambio de régimen que nos recuerda tanto a las fallidas guerras eternas de Afganistán, Irak, Libia, y pare usted de contar. No a los golpes de Estado dados por la CIA, que nos recuerda tanto a los 30.000 desaparecidos por la CIA en los golpes de Estado contra Argentina, al golpe de Estado de Pinochet y los 5.000 jóvenes asesinados y desaparecidos. ¿Hasta cuándo golpes de Estado de la CIA? América Latina no los quiere, no los necesita y los repudia.
Tensions have escalated in the Caribbean, with the U.S. forces reportedly destroying 5 suspected drug smuggling vessels, killing 27 people. Trump defended the operation, saying that traditional anti-smuggling efforts had failed. The announcement has drawn bipartisan criticism in the U.S. Congress, with the lawmakers accusing the president of committing an act of war without legislative approval. Now, Hamas handed over more bodies of deceased hostages to Israel, a sign of progress after a number of apparent setbacks since U.S. President Donald Trump touted his plan to end the Gaza war. This report tells you more.
Palestinian militant group Hamas handed over more bodies of deceased hostages to Israel on Tuesday. It's a sign of progress after a number of apparent setbacks, with both sides accusing the other of violating a ceasefire brokered by U.S. President Donald Trump. The Israeli military said on Tuesday it had received 4 coffins from the Red Cross, which were being taken for identification in Israel. The bodies were returned after Israel announced it would cut in half the number of humanitarian aid trucks allowed into Gaza. That move was designed to punish Hamas for what Israel called the group's violation of its agreement to transfer remains under the ceasefire deal reached last week. It was not immediately clear if the handing over of bodies was sufficient for Israel to restore the full flow of aid. The return of 28 dead hostages has remained one of the final details to be worked out in the deal to end more than 2 years of conflict. Hamas has now handed over 8 coffins of dead hostages, leaving at least 19 presumed dead and 1 unaccounted for. The outlook for Trump's peace plan darkened further on Tuesday when the president threatened Hamas with military strikes unless the militant group disarmed.
And if they don't disarm, we will disarm them. And it'll happen quickly and perhaps violently.
Hamas has so far rejected demands it lay down its arms. and Trump has previously given his blessing to Hamas to reassert some control over Gaza, at least temporarily. On Tuesday, Hamas fighters were increasingly visible in the streets of Gaza, according to residents, and in a video circulated late on Monday, the location of which was confirmed by Reuters, Hamas fighters executed several people they accused of collaborating with Israel in a public square in Gaza City. Hamas sources told Reuters on Tuesday the group would tolerate no more violations of order in Gaza and would target collaborators, armed looters, and drug dealers. Meanwhile, Gaza health authorities said Israel killed 6 Palestinians in drone strikes in 2 locations in Gaza. Hamas accused Israel of violating the ceasefire, while the Israeli military said it had fired on people who crossed truce lines and approached its forces after ignoring calls to turn back.
Aid trucks rolled into Gaza and Israel resumed preparations to open the main Rafah crossing after a dispute over the return of the bodies of dead hostages that had threatened to derail the fragile ceasefire deal with Hamas in Gaza. More in this report.
Trucks carrying aid and fuel rolled into Gaza on Wednesday as Israel was expected to open the main Rafah crossing between Egypt and the Gaza Strip. It comes after a dispute over the return of the bodies of dead hostages that had threatened to derail the fragile ceasefire deal with Hamas. Israel had threatened to keep Rafah shut and reduce aid supplies because Hamas was returning bodies too slowly. However, the militant group returned more bodies overnight, though Israeli authorities said one of those bodies was not that of a hostage. An Israeli security official said on Wednesday preparations were underway to open Rafah to Gazan citizens, while a second official said that the previously agreed upon 600 aid trucks would enter. Israel's public broadcaster Khan reported that aid deliveries would include food, medical supplies, fuel, cooking gas, and equipment to repair vital infrastructure. It's little comfort to some Palestinians returning to their homes after being displaced by the conflict. Al-Abed Al-Fumi says there is nowhere for her family of 36 to go.
There's no work, no food, no drinks, no housing, and now winter is coming. By God Almighty, I'm telling you, I swear we don't have blankets. I have nothing, nothing at all. I left and my house was destroyed, and I'm still in the same situation. And now we are suffering. Where are we supposed to live? Where are we supposed to go? What are we supposed to do?
And the dispute over the return of bodies still has the potential to upset the ceasefire deal along with the other major issues that are yet to be resolved. 21 bodies of hostages remain in Gaza, though some may be hard to find or recover because of destruction during the conflict. The deal also requires Israel to return the bodies of 360 Palestinians. The first group of 45 was handed over on Tuesday, and the bodies were being identified, said Palestinian health authorities. Later phases of the truce call for Hamas to disarm and cede power, which it has so far refused to do. In recent days, it has launched a security crackdown in Gaza as it battles local clans that had tried to take over areas of the territory during the conflict.